You were never meant to stay small. And if hearing that makes your chest tighten instead of expand, stay with me. That reaction tells me everything about how long you have been carrying more than your share. You have been told that your sensitivity makes you fragile, that your depth makes you impractical, that your emotional intelligence makes you naive, that your compassion makes you weak, that your intuition makes you unrealistic, that your boundaries make you selfish, and that your exhaustion is simply the price of being a good person. But what if the part of you that has been underestimated your entire life is the exact part that is about to change everything? Not by becoming louder, not by becoming harder, not by becoming ruthless, but by finally becoming regulated. Because when an empath stops surviving and starts operating from a regulated nervous system, something radical happens. They stop leaking energy. They stop collapsing into overgiving. They stop shrinking to keep others comfortable. They stop confusing kindness with self-erasure. And they become a force that no one saw coming. In the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through the truth about why you were underestimated in the first place. Why your nervous system learned to hide your power. Why you were trained to doubt your authority. And why your sensitivity was never the problem. Halfway through, I am going to give you one clear internal shift that moves you from emotional overextension into emotional leadership. And by the end, you will understand what you are actually becoming. Because you are not here to be consumed. You are here to be catalytic. And once you see what has really been forming underneath your exhaustion, you will never again confuse your survival patterns with your identity. Most empaths grow up learning one core belief before they ever learn their own name. I am only safe if everyone else is okay. That belief gets written into the nervous system long before it becomes conscious thought. It forms in homes where emotions were unpredictable, where love was conditional, where safety depended on reading the room, where silence could be dangerous, where anger could erupt, where disappointment felt catastrophic, where withdrawal meant abandonment. So you learn to track everything. Tone shifts, energy changes, micro-expressions, mood fluctuations, the difference between a tired sigh and a resentful one, the difference between a quiet room and a tense one. You learned what a slammed cabinet meant, what a forced smile meant, what a clipped voice meant, what a long pause meant. And you learned quickly, because your survival depended on it. This is where your empathy was trained, not born, trained. Your nervous system learned to scan constantly, to anticipate, to predict, to prevent, to smooth, to stabilize, to regulate the people around you because no one was regulating you. So you became the emotional thermostat. You walked into rooms and adjusted yourself to whatever temperature you felt. You learned to disappear in conflict. You learned to become useful in chaos. You learned to be agreeable in tension. You learned to be the calm one when others were explosive. You learned to be the strong one when others were falling apart. And because you were good at it, the world rewarded you for it. You were called mature. You were called wise beyond your years. You were called compassionate. You were called understanding. You were called selfless. You were called a good listener. But no one asked how tired you were. No one noticed how often you swallowed your own needs. No one noticed how often you abandoned yourself to maintain peace. No one noticed how much emotional labor you were carrying. And slowly, quietly, you built an identity around it. I am the one who understands. I am the one who holds space. I am the one who feels deeply. I am the one who can handle it. I am the strong one. And the world learned to underestimate you because you taught them that you could carry everything. You taught them that you would. You taught them that you should. You taught them that you always would. But here is the truth no one ever told you. You were not built to carry everyone. You were built to lead. But leadership was never safe in your childhood, so your nervous system learned to make you small. Underestimation is not accidental. It is often trained. Empaths are underestimated because they learned early that being visible was dangerous, that having needs was risky, that taking up space created consequences, that asserting themselves led to punishment, withdrawal, ridicule, or emotional abandonment. So their nervous system learned to associate power with danger. Power meant becoming a target. Power meant being blamed. Power meant being resented. Power meant being rejected. So the system adapted. It learned to hide your authority behind softness. It learned to cloak your intelligence in humility. It learned to wrap your strength in service. It learned to disguise your leadership as support. You learned to be indispensable without being respected. You learned to be relied on without being valued. You learned to be needed without being protected. And the longer you stayed in that pattern, the more the world learned to see you as background instead of backbone. You became the one people vent to, the one people lean on, the one people dump on, the one people expect to fix it, but rarely the one people follow. And over time, something inside you started to ache, not because you wanted control, not because you wanted attention, but because you could feel the untapped capacity inside you. You could feel that you were built for more than emotional cleanup. You could feel that you were meant for more than being the safe container for other people's chaos. You could feel that you were carrying leadership energy in a system that never allowed you to express it. And when leadership energy is trapped in a survival nervous system, it turns into exhaustion, burnout, resentment, withdrawal, depression, chronic fatigue, emotional numbness, decision paralysis, overthinking, people-pleasing, collapse. Not because you are weak, but because your nervous system has been running a marathon. It was never meant to run alone. Here is the part that changes everything. Your sensitivity is not the source of your burnout. Your dysregulation is. Sensitivity is capacity. Dysregulation is overload. A regulated empath is not overwhelmed by emotion. A regulated empath is fluent in emotion. A dysregulated empath absorbs. A regulated empath observes. A dysregulated empath merges. A regulated empath relates. A dysregulated empath overfunctions. A regulated empath leads. When your nervous system is regulated, your empathy becomes discernment instead of depletion. You stop feeling responsible for what you did not create. You stop carrying what does not belong to you. You stop rescuing people from lessons they need to learn. You stop managing emotions that are not yours to manage. You become emotionally sovereign, and emotional sovereignty is where your underestimated power lives. Because when you are no longer leaking energy, you have presence. When you have presence, people listen. When people listen, influence emerges. When influence emerges, leadership follows. Not the loud, dominating, ego-driven leadership. The grounded, stabilizing, attuned leadership. The kind that changes rooms when you enter. The kind that people feel safe around. The kind that people trust. The kind that people follow. This is what you were actually training for. Your childhood trained you in crisis management. Your nervous system learned how to stay calm under pressure, how to think clearly in chaos, how to read emotional dynamics, how to anticipate breakdowns, how to stabilize volatile systems. That is executive functioning. That is leadership. That is command presence. That is emotional intelligence at the highest level. But you were taught to use it to survive, not to lead. So your nervous system wrapped your power in self-doubt. It told you that you were too sensitive to be strong, that you were too emotional to be respected, that you were too kind to be taken seriously, that you were too soft to be powerful. And you believed it because believing it kept you safe. But now your system is ready for a new job. It no longer needs to protect you from visibility. It no longer needs to keep you small. It no longer needs to hide your authority. Because you are no longer a child in an unsafe environment. You are an adult with agency. And your nervous system is learning that power no longer equals danger. This is the moment when underestimated empaths start to surprise the world, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming fully themselves. Here is the shift. Stop asking, how do I help? Start asking, what am I responsible for? Because those are not the same question. The unhealed empath asks, how do I fix this? How do I make them feel better? How do I keep the peace? How do I stop the discomfort? How do I prevent the fallout? The healed empath asks, what is actually mine to carry? What is actually mine to solve? What is actually mine to hold? What is actually mine to lead? This one shift changes everything. It moves you from emotional laborer to emotional leader, from rescuer to regulator, from overgiver to stabilizer, from absorber to anchor. When you walk into a room regulated, you become the calm that organizes the chaos, not by fixing, not by managing, not by overfunctioning, but by being steady. And steadiness is magnetic. People unconsciously entrain to it. They mirror it. They borrow it. They settle in its presence. That is leadership. That is power. And that is why you were underestimated. Because your power was never loud. It was always grounded. The world mistakes calm for passivity, stillness for weakness, gentleness for compliance, attunement for submission. But those who understand nervous system dynamics know the truth. Regulated presence is the highest form of authority. It is what makes therapists effective. It is what makes leaders respected. It is what makes teachers influential. It is what makes healers powerful. It is what makes visionaries trusted. And you have been cultivating this capacity your entire life. Through every moment you stayed calm in chaos. Through every moment you de-escalated tension. Through every moment you held space. Through every moment you regulated someone else's emotions. You were training. You just did not know it yet. Now your work is to redirect that skill inward, to regulate yourself first, to lead from your own center, to anchor in your own body, to claim your own authority. This is when the empath becomes formidable, not aggressive, not domineering, not hardened, formidable. Because you cannot be manipulated when you are regulated. You cannot be drained when you are boundaried. You cannot be dismissed when you are grounded. You cannot be underestimated when you are embodied. There is a moment in every empath's healing journey when the old identity starts to dissolve. The identity of the helper, the fixer, the emotional sponge, the one who holds everyone together. And it feels terrifying because that identity kept you safe. It kept you needed. It kept you connected. It kept you relevant. So when it starts to fall away, your nervous system panics. It says, who am I if I am not the strong one? Who am I if I am not the understanding one? Who am I if I stop overgiving? Who am I if I stop carrying everyone? But what is really happening is this. You are shedding a survival role, and survival roles always feel like identity until you outgrow them. The truth is, you were never meant to be the emotional pack mule. You were meant to be the emotional compass, the one who sets direction, the one who holds vision, the one who stabilizes systems, the one who creates safety through presence. This is leadership at its deepest level. And once you step into it, people will start responding to you differently. Not because you changed, but because your nervous system did. When your nervous system is regulated, your voice carries weight. Your words land. Your boundaries hold. Your decisions are respected. Your presence is felt. You stop over-explaining. You stop justifying. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop negotiating your worth. You move with clarity. And clarity is confidence. Confidence is authority. Authority is influence. This is what it looks like when an empath stops shrinking. Not becoming louder. Not becoming harsher. Not becoming colder. Becoming anchored. And anchored people are impossible to ignore. Here is what is being born in you now. A new identity. Not the empath who absorbs. The empath who leads. Not the empath who carries. The empath who stabilizes. Not the empath who rescues. The empath who guides. Not the empath who disappears. The empath who stands. Not the empath who survives. The empath who commands presence. You are not losing your sensitivity. You are upgrading it from survival tool to leadership instrument, from trauma adaptation to embodied wisdom, from emotional reflex to conscious power. The world is changing, and the leadership it needs now is not aggressive, not dominating, not ego-driven. It needs emotionally intelligent leaders. It needs regulated nervous systems. It needs grounded presence. It needs attuned authority. It needs people who can hold complexity without collapsing. It needs people like you. People who can feel deeply and think clearly. People who can stay calm in chaos. People who can read emotional dynamics. People who can stabilize volatile systems. The world does not need you to become harder. It needs you to become more embodied. So here is the identity you are stepping into. You are not an empath who gets drained. You are an empath who directs energy. You are not an empath who gets overwhelmed. You are an empath who regulates systems. You are not an empath who disappears. You are an empath who anchors rooms. You are not an empath who carries everyone. You are an empath who leads with presence. You are not underestimated anymore. You are emerging, and the world is about to feel the difference. Not because you are louder, but because you are finally standing in your full authority. You were never meant to be background. You were built to be backbone. And now, you are ready to claim it. The moment you start becoming anchored, something else begins to surface. Grief. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind you post about. The quiet kind that lives underneath your old identity. Grief for how long you tried to earn safety through usefulness. Grief for how often you softened your truth to avoid being misunderstood. Grief for how many times you stayed in conversations you had already outgrown. Grief for how many relationships were built on access to your empathy, not respect for your personhood. And this is one of the hardest truths for underestimated empaths to face. Some people did not underestimate you because they could not see you. They underestimated you because it benefited them to see you as small. If you were the one who always understood, they never had to grow. If you were the one who always forgave, they never had to repair. If you were the one who always explained yourself, they never had to listen deeply. If you were the one who always gave the benefit of the doubt, they never had to be accountable. Your softness made it easy for people to stay emotionally lazy. And when you begin to heal, you stop being compatible with emotional laziness. That is not arrogance. That is nervous system maturity. Because a regulated person can feel compassion without negotiating reality. They can understand why someone behaves the way they do without offering themselves up as the solution. They can see the wound without volunteering to be the bandage. That is where your power becomes unmistakable. The hidden patterns that kept you underestimated. If you are an empath who has been underestimated, there are usually a few patterns that show up not because you chose them, but because your nervous system learned them. I want to name them clearly, because naming is the beginning of separation. When you cannot name a pattern, you think it is your personality. When you can name it, you can change it. Here is the first pattern. Pattern 1. You confuse being attuned with being responsible. You feel the tension, so you think it is yours to fix. You sense the disappointment, so you think you must compensate. You notice someone's withdrawal, so you think you did something wrong. You walk into a room and your system immediately starts scanning for what is off. Not because you are mystical, because you are trained. Your nervous system is asking one question: what do I need to become so nothing goes wrong? This is the part of you that learned to earn safety by preempting discomfort, and it works in the short term. You prevent conflict, you reduce volatility, you keep people stable, but it costs you in the long term, because the price of managing everyone else is abandoning yourself. And over time, that abandonment becomes your baseline. You start living slightly outside your own body. You start living slightly ahead of the moment. You start living slightly inside other people's reactions. That is not empathy. That is self-erasure disguised as sensitivity. And it is exactly why people underestimate you, because you keep positioning yourself as support, not as a source. Pattern 2. You apologize for your impact. Underestimated empaths often have a very specific habit. They speak, then immediately soften what they said. They set a boundary, then explain it 3 different ways so the other person does not feel bad. They share a need, then wrap it in a story so it does not sound like a demand. They name a truth, then quickly add, "but I could be wrong," even when they are not. Not because they are dishonest, because their nervous system associates directness with danger. Directness used to create consequences. So now, even in adulthood, your system tries to protect you by diluting your own authority. And when you dilute your authority, people learn not to take you seriously, not because you do not have wisdom, but because your nervous system keeps sending the message: please do not be upset with me for existing. That message is not conscious, but it is felt. Pattern 3. You overfunction in relationships. Overfunctioning looks like this. You do more emotional labor than the other person. You think more about the relationship than they do. You carry the unspoken tension. You initiate the repair. You monitor their moods. You adjust your tone. You anticipate their triggers. You keep the relationship afloat, and you tell yourself it is love. But the nervous system reason is often this: if I do not carry this, it will fall apart. That is not love. That is survival responsibility. It is the child part of you still trying to prevent abandonment. And here is the painful truth. When you overfunction, you make it easy for other people to underfunction. When you carry everything, other people do not have to develop emotional strength, so they stay dependent on your regulation. And dependence can look like love until you stop providing it. Then you see what it really was. Pattern 4. You mistake intensity for connection. This one is subtle. Many empaths grew up in environments where emotional intensity was normal. High moods, low moods, unpredictable moods. Crisis, repair, crisis, repair. So the nervous system learns intensity equals bonding. Then you grow up and calm relationships feel boring. Stable people feel unfamiliar. Simple communication feels flat. And without realizing it, you keep choosing dynamics that activate your scanning, because activation feels like purpose. You feel needed, you feel useful, you feel engaged, you feel relevant. But what you are actually feeling is dysregulation. That is why healing feels like losing yourself at first. Because when you become regulated, you stop craving intensity. You stop confusing adrenaline with intimacy. You stop calling anxiety chemistry. And that shift makes your life quieter, but not emptier, clearer. The hard truth that sets you free: if you have been underestimated, there is a good chance you have been doing something that seems noble, but is secretly costing you. You have been trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Let that land. Some people keep you in the too sensitive category because it gives them an excuse not to take responsibility for how they impact you. If you are too emotional, then they do not have to be accountable. If you are overthinking, then they do not have to be clear. If you are reading into things, then they do not have to be honest. If you are dramatic, then they do not have to repair. Underestimation becomes a convenient narrative, and your nervous system, trained to keep connection, tries to earn your way out of that narrative by being nicer, by being more patient, by explaining more gently, by giving more chances, by staying calm even when you are being dismissed. But healing is the moment you stop auditioning for respect. You stop negotiating your reality. You stop trying to prove that your feelings are valid. You start relating from truth, not from permission. And that is where your life begins to change. Because people can only underestimate you when you keep presenting yourself as negotiable. A regulated empath is not negotiable, not in a rigid way, in a grounded way. They do not threaten. They do not chase. They do not plead. They simply hold their line. The promised action step: emotional sovereignty in 60 seconds. Here is the action step I promised. It is simple, but it is not easy because it interrupts your nervous system's default job. It is called name it, place it, return to self. Do this the next time you walk into a room and you feel yourself start scanning, absorbing, or bracing. Step 1. Name it silently. Label what is happening in your body, not what is happening in the other person. Not they are upset, not this room is tense. Instead, my chest is tight, my stomach is pulling in, my jaw is clenching, my breath got shallow, my shoulders lifted. This matters because naming brings your awareness out of the room and back into your nervous system. Step 2, place it. Then ask, where does this belong? If it is yours, place it in your body with gentleness. If it is not yours, place it outside of you. Here is what I mean. If you feel someone else's agitation and you start carrying it, imagine placing it 2 feet in front of you, like setting down a heavy bag. You are not denying it. You are not rejecting them. You are simply refusing fusion. You are practicing separation. Because empathy without separation becomes absorption. And absorption is what drains you. Step 3, return to self. Now bring one hand to your lower ribs or your belly if you can, discreetly, or press your tongue gently to the roof of your mouth, or feel your feet inside your shoes. And take one slower breath than you think you need. Then say internally, I can be here without carrying this. That sentence is regulation. It tells your nervous system, I am safe enough to stay in myself. And if you do this consistently, something changes over time. Your system stops equating attunement with responsibility. You remain emotionally intelligent, but you stop being emotionally harvested. You become present, but not porous. You become kind, but not collapsible. That is emotional sovereignty. And once you have it, your whole life reorganizes around it. What people will do when you stop being porous, I want to prepare you for what happens next, because this is where many empaths panic and undo their growth. When you stop absorbing, people will feel it. Not everyone, but the ones who benefited from your over-functioning. They may say you have changed. They may say you are distant. They may say you are cold. They may say you are selfish. They may say you do not care like you used to, but what they really mean is you are no longer managing my emotions for me. And that can feel threatening to someone who is used to outsourcing regulation. This is where you need compassion and backbone at the same time. Compassion because you can understand why they react. Backbone because you do not return to self-erasure to make them comfortable. Here is the line that many healed empaths learn to live by. I can care about you without carrying you. That is the boundary. And when you hold it, you start to see who is capable of real relationship. Because real relationship requires two regulated nervous systems, not one person doing emotional labor for both. The identity shift that surprises the world. Now we come to what you are actually becoming. The empath that the world underestimated was operating from a nervous system trained for survival. Hyper-attuned, over-responsible, over-adaptive, over-giving, over-explaining, over-managing. That version of you was powerful, but it was hidden inside a role. The healed version of you keeps the sensitivity, but loses the survival role. And that is what shocks people, because they expected you to always be available. They expected you to always bend. They expected you to always understand first and speak later. They expected you to always take the emotional hit so the room could stay stable. But now you are regulated. Now you are clear. Now, you do not rush to smooth discomfort. You let reality be real. You let people have their feelings without rushing to fix them. You let silence exist without panicking. You let someone be disappointed without collapsing. You let conflict happen without abandoning yourself. That is what emotional adulthood looks like. And most people are not used to seeing it from someone they categorized as soft. So yes, you will surprise them. Not with aggression, with steadiness. Not with intensity, with clarity. Not with performance, with presence. And presence is the most underrated form of power on earth.